Okay, so like I was saying, today's all about the two kingdoms, Protists and Fungi. So we're going to talk Protists first, and then we'll discuss the Fungi a little bit. So jot down your notes if you like here that the Protists are the most diverse kingdom of all of the kingdoms. In fact, they're so diverse that we fundamentally recognize that they really don't make up a single kingdom. We need to split them out. And I'm sure if you go online and look up some information, you'd find that we have started splitting those out. Most of that information hasn't actually made it into the high school textbooks yet, because it's all really new. Some things we can say about Protists is that they are all eukaryotes. They have cells that are similar to your cells. They've got a nucleus, complex organelles, membrane-bound organelles. Most of them are quite a bit larger than a bacteria. We classify Protists for the most part by how they move, how they get around. It's kind of like the simplest way to classify these little buggers because they're just such a strange group. Okay? So we're going to look at some of the different ways that they move, and I'm going to give you the words that go along with those. Kingdom Protista. Now today when we get down to lab, you guys are going to be getting a bunch of these in focus under the microscope and drawing them and trying to discover how they move. So you're going to be looking for some of the features I show you here. Okay. Protists, all eukaryotes, classified by locomotion. Cool? Good deal. So the first ones we'll look at are the amoeboid movement ones. These ones move through something called a pseudopod. So a pseudopod essentially means false feet or false foot. Okay. The classical example of this is the amoeba. It basically looks like a splotch like this when it's dead. And then over here on the right, you can see one. We'll get this guy rolling here. You can see one that's moving. So this is how they actually move. Look at how it just kind of looks like it's growing, but really it's streaming its cytoplasm, the liquid inside of its cell, and it's changing the shape of its cell to kind of pull and stretch itself along. It's kind of gross, isn't it? So when these things eat, what they'll do is they'll find some food, obviously can't be very fast, and they'll surround it. See how this little piece is going around something here? He's probably not eating, but they would surround it and then slowly pull it inside their cell, forming a vacuole around it, and then some enzymes would digest it, and then they would excrete the waste by pushing that towards the outside of their cell. So that's an amoeba. Okay, we say they have amoeboid movement. So jot down pseudopod. That's an important word there. You'll see that. You'll use that today. Those are these projections, these extensions of their cell. Okay. This is a single cell, by the way. Many protists are single-celled. Okay, many of them are. Got it? Try to jot every last thing down, but definitely down pseudopod and amoeba. Those go together. Those two words go together. It's how they move. Okay? The next group are called the ciliates. Ciliates. It's another funny word. So ciliate stands for cilia, which is all these little microtubule structures. You can kind of see them around this paramecium here, which is our example. So you might jot down example paramecium, and cilia are how they move. They're little hair-like things. Even if you don't write down microtubules, write down hair-like things. So it's all these little fuzzy, and in the drawing you can see it really well. Down here, they just kind of look like fuzz, and that's how they'll look underneath the microscope. So they beat those little things along, and that's how they scoot through the water. And they can move pretty fast, too. This over here is a picture of a stentor, and the cilia are at the top around this cup-shaped thing, and it sweeps bacteria and food down into this bell-shaped thing where it ingests it. So they use them for eating, too. Thank you. This is a different day for me. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Got it. Cilia, ciliates, paramecium. So you'll look at those today and you'll look for these little structures. That's what you're looking for. And you got to look close because they just look so like sort of some fuzz. Let me point out another feature on the paramecium because you're going to look for it today. It can be very hard to see. You see this little slit in the top of this one? That's called the oral groove. So they beat these little hairs, little cilia, and they will push bacteria down inside of this to consume. So think about how small something has to be for its primary food source to be bacteria. It's pretty small, but it's many, many times larger than a bacteria. So these are actually going to look a little like something as opposed to the bacteria the other day. Okay, those are the ciliates. Now the flagellates. So flagellate stands basically for whip, and these are things that have a whip-like, one or more, whip-like tails, and that's how they move back and forth. Okay. So the little tail spins around, and our example is the euglena. It's a very strange creature. Note what color it is. How do you think it gets its food? See what color it is? It's green. Photosynthesis makes sense, right? So it actually does both. It eats things and it does photosynthesis. So the protists are a real weird mixed bag. Okay, so this is a drawing of the cell here, but we're going to see things that kind of look like this one on the left here, where that little tail whips back and forth. And some of them have more than one of those flagella. So jot down flagella. You can put whip-like tail. Euglena is our example. We'll look at those down in lab. And they look green. Now the prepared slides might not look green. They're probably stained. All right. Good. Euglena, flagella, flagellate. I mean, those words are pretty similar, right? So they have this whipped tail on them. Great. There are some protists that are symbiotic. So this isn't a type of movement. This is something else that is kind of strange. So some of these things have to live with or inside of other creatures to survive. It doesn't mean they're parasitic, but this example down here at the bottom is Plasmodium. This guy over here. So the two pictures to the right, this is human blood cells, these bigger things and the red things. Inside, you'll notice those tiny little dots. Those are little spores, those little balls inside of there. So this is the Plasmodium that's responsible for malaria. So there are protists that cause serious disease, and malaria is very difficult to eradicate from your body because these cells are eukaryotic cells. Like, they look like your cells. Attacking a bacteria cell with antibiotics is very different. It's got a cell wall. It's a very different type of cell. These look like your cells. So it's very difficult to treat somebody who has malaria. This other one is an example of mutualism. Trichonema, I can't even say the word. Trichonopha, I don't know. I honestly can't say that. These guys here are found in the guts of termites. And there's a drawing there of one. So these things are mutualists. And what they do is they actually help the termite break down wood. Ever wonder how termites can eat wood? They have inside of them a protist that actually helps them break it down. And that's how they do it. Okay? And it kind of looks like this. So you don't have to remember these words at all, but just know that there's some that are symbiotic, some are mutualists, some are parasites. Trichonympha, I think that's right. Got it? Okay. Let's do fungi now. So switch your brains. We did one big kingdom called Protista. This is the other big kingdom called fungi, right? What kingdom are we part of? Animals. Yes, we're animals, right? So these are also some things we can say about fungi is that they're also eukaryotes, just like our cells. These also have a cell wall, kind of like plants do. Okay, it's a slightly different cell wall than plants have. So they're definitely not plants, even though they kind of look like plants. They are both single and multi-celled, so they're kind of mixed as to what they can be. Yeast is single-celled. Many fungi are multi-celled. They're heterotrophic. They eat other things, and they eat dead stuff. So they're heterotrophic decomposers. They decompose rotting stuff on the ground. And we all know that, like fungus grows on rotting logs, stuff like that. We classify these things mostly by their sporangium, which is the thing that contains the spores. So one way that fungus reproduces is through spores. You've probably heard that before. They're microscopic, and then they fall on the surface that might be moist and damp, and they start to grow. So they're kind of like a seed in a way, but they're not really seeds. So we're going to look at the shapes of the structures that hold their spores. If you just look at the spores, they all look like little round dots. It's hard to decide what they are. But the thing that holds the spores is pretty specific. So we'll look at those sporangia as we go. Okay, so let's look at some structures before we get into identifying them. Here are some structures you'll want to know, and I've got a little picture over here for you, a little drawing. The first one is the hyphae. Hyphae, they're kind of like roots in a way, but in a fungus, they make up the whole body. They're definitely not a root, but they're the part that, for the most part, is growing underneath the soil. Many of them are microscopic, okay? They're very small, and this is what helps it digest its food. This is what holds it into the soil. So they do perform kind of some of the similar functions as roots, but they're not roots, okay? So when you put a bunch of hyphae together, it's called mycelium. It's just another word that we've got here. So, like, essentially, the entire mushroom, if you think of a mushroom, is made up of mycelium. It's made up of all these hyphae all bunched together. The picture in the middle here is a microscopic picture of hyphae. They're very small. So what's happening on this bread mold up here is those hyphae are growing through the bread, and they are literally dissolving and absorbing the nutrients in the bread. So if you've ever left moldy bread out for a while, you notice that it starts to get real soggy and gross and nasty. That's the fungus dissolving it and then consuming it as it goes. It usually has a pretty nasty smell too, right? Have you guys seen fungus like this on your bread? Yeah, no. Has anybody ever eaten a moldy piece of bread on accident? Yeah? What did it taste like? Nothing? Oh my goodness. Didn't eat a big enough piece. Yeah, it tastes like dirt. It tastes just like dirt. Do you ever wonder why it tastes like dirt? Yeah, because most of the soil is made up of fungal hyphae. There's a lot of fungus growing through the soil. You can't see it, but if you were to eat dirt, if you've eaten dirt before and eaten moldy bread before, there's a striking similarity. And it's because the fungus is growing through both of those. Yeah, it's kind of gross, right? So the fruiting body is also termed the mushroom. So the fruiting body is fruit because it's making the spores. This is the reproductive structure of the fungus over here on the left. That's what reproduces. Okay. The hyphae down here are growing through stuff, consuming stuff as they go. And they can be involved in reproduction too. But the sole purpose of a mushroom is for reproduction. So it's called the fruit. Right? We've kind of termed a lot of the terminology similar to plants, isn't it? In fact, they used to be classified with plants a long time ago. But we now know that's not right. They're actually more closely related to, anybody? Animals. Whoa, that's weird, isn't it? Okay, fungus is interesting because you don't have to write this down, but they are one of the world's largest organisms. This is a fairy ring. Has anybody seen these in their yard? Yeah, they're pretty neat, aren't they? So if you could see underneath the soil, in some cases, these fungus can be growing underground, and their hyphae can be traveling underground for like hundreds and hundreds of meters underground, like humongous tracts of land covered by all the same organism. These are all part of the same creature. Every little mushroom up here is living together as part of the same creature. This is how it fruits. So it's getting ready to release its spores. But the whole creature, the majority of it's under the ground. So they can be humongous. I know, usually think of things like whales as being the biggest creatures, right? But fungus is huge. Look at the size of this one down here on the right. You can just see the outline of it. See the little green patch like that. So a lot of fungus has mutualistic relationships with the plants. And so some plants, it helps them grow to have the fungus around them. Fairy rings are pretty neat. We've got them here. Usually we see them out here every year. We're going to do an outdoor lab here pretty soon, and we probably will find some. It's not uncommon. Okay, let's look at how they reproduce. So they've got two main forms of reproduction. They can reproduce asexually, and if you remember, that's just cloning, right? And they do that sometimes through spores, sometimes through budding off little pieces, and sometimes just having a piece broken off. And you might realize that if you've got a piece of moldy bread and you tap it on another piece of bread that's not moldy, before too long that other piece of bread will be moldy. Most of us recognize that. We've seen it before. But they can also reproduce sexually, and they do that through spore formation. Okay. In the sexual reproduction, what happens in terms of bread mold is that two of the hyphae will grow up together here. We call them a positive and a negative strain, and they will swap some DNA here. And they'll create this little spore down here, so zygospore, and it will grow up into this thing. This is the sporangia, and it will release the spores, and then the whole process will start back over again. So that's in bread mold. They're all a little bit different. Okay, so they basically can do two types of reproduction. Let's look at the different types here. First group are the basidiomycotes. Okay, the basidiomycotes, otherwise known as the club fungi. I'll put that on the next page, but if you want to write down club goes with basidiomycote. These are typically the things that you think of as mushroom. When I say fungus, this is probably what you think of. It's got a cap, it's sometimes got gills. The spores are usually up underneath the gills. Okay. If you look at it under the microscope, which we're going to do here in a little bit, you're going to see that the sporangia had these little, they're like a little stick, and then the spores are these little balls on the end of the sticks. So this is one, this is one, this is one. You're going to see these little balls on the ends of these little sticks. So it kind of looks like, I guess if you think of it, it looks like a club. Like if you pull that little piece off, you could like club something with it. I guess that's where they get the whole club fungus thing. Yes? Sure. You got that? Basidiomycote. So jot down that they're called club fungus. Okay. Jot down that they're called club fungus. They've got those little sporangia with little balls on top like that. And you've seen some of these. Has anybody seen one of these white ones like this? Yeah, puffball. Have you eaten one? No, they're edible. Don't eat them raw. Many mushrooms are very, very toxic, so unless you know somebody who knows what they're doing, don't just go eating mushrooms. They can be very, very dangerous. Right? Some of them taste pretty good, though. Do you guys like mushrooms on your pizza? Yes, no, yeah. Oh, I think they're fantastic. Okay, next group, the Zygomycotes. So jot down Zygomycota. This is your bread mold. Your mold on your Chinese food. You see it in here? Ooh, nasty. So doesn't produce those big mushroomy looking things, kind of grows through the bread like this. And then it's going to create these sporangia that have, it's essentially, I think it looks like a bunch of little Doctor Whoville sticks, like truffula tree looking things. It's like a little post, and then there's a big round ball on top. If you bust that ball open, inside of it are all these tiny little circles that are spores. So that's how it's reproducing. So you're going to look for these today. Okay, it's going to be a little stick with a ball on top. There might be lots of them, all different spots, different directions. Okay. Zygomycotes. Next one. Everybody got it? Ascomycotes. The Ascomycota are called the sac fungi. Okay, the sac fungi, because their spores are in little sacs. An example of that would be the morel mushroom. Does anybody like morels? No morel eaters? No? Have you guys never had a morel before? Really? Have you had one? They're fantastic. Like, really good mushrooms. Oh my goodness. It's making me hungry just looking at them. So, in the Ascomycotes, it's going to kind of look like this picture here on the top right, this red one. It's been dyed. The little red dots are the spores, and it looks like kind of almost pages. But if you could see it more three-dimensionally, Each one of these is like a little hollow tube. It's a little sac, and inside the sac are all these spores. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spores in that one. Okay, and the next one next to it is another little sac. So they're packed so close together it can be hard to tell they're little sacs, but these are Ascomycotes. They'll look like that. Okay, that's what you're looking for under the microscope. Another picture of some morels. Fantastic, right? How much do mushrooms go for? Well, some mushrooms are worth a heck of a lot of money. Portobellos, not so much. You can buy those at the grocery store. Morels are a little bit harder to find, anywhere from $10 to $50 a pound, depending on what season you can provide them in. Truffles, $150 to $500 a pound. Yeah, like find a pound of truffles in the woods and you made some money. Have you guys ever had truffles before? Usually you season food with them. They're super pungent, like really, really tasty. Oh my gosh, so good. Truffles are usually found over in Europe, and they actually use pigs to hunt them. You might have heard of something called a truffle pig before. It's not just some fake thing. Like they're actual pigs that they train to smell these because these grow underground. You have to dig them up out of the ground to find them. Yeah, but they're worth quite a bit of money because they're real hard to find. But people train pigs to go find them. Kind of cool. Let's look, one last thing. This is not a fungus. It's not a protist. It's both. This is a creature that is a symbiotic relationship between two other organisms, a fungus and an algae. So the fungus is providing the structure. Okay? These are called lichens. We will see these when we go out for our outdoor hike. You'll want to know what they are. It's a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and an algae. Now the algae is green. See the greenish part of these things? Usually it's green, and it does photosynthesis, right? Photosynthesis makes energy from the sun. The fungus is the structural part of it that gives it a place to grow. And the fungus is actually growing literally through its cells. So it's eating what the algae is making from the sun. It's feeding on it. But it provides the algae with nutrients and water and things like that. So it's a weird relationship. Nobody's really sure if it's mutualistic or parasitic. There's like debates on both of those things. Usually it's said to be mutualistic in your books. Okay? But you got what a lichen is. Okay.